Welcome to Mom and Mind, a podcast about maternal mental health, discussing conception, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. Real stories from moms and family members who have made it from struggling to wellness, and interviews with experts and advocates who work for moms and families to get the help they need. This podcast is meant to offer information and awareness and is not a replacement for treatment by a professional or professional training. Hey everybody, welcome back to Mom and Mind. I'm your host, Dr. Kat. We are talking with Jane Honikman in this episode. Jane began her career in maternal mental health in 1977 when she co-founded Postpartum Education for Parents in Santa Barbara. And then she went on to found Postpartum Support International in 1987. And that is an organization that I draw upon heavily and that a lot of us draw on for support and information and training to this day. Jane was elected PSI's first president in 1989 and operated the organization from her home until 2004. Jane has authored many articles and books and educational material on postpartum issues and how to start community support networks. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. Her books are Community Support for New Families, I'm Listening, My Diary, A Postpartum Journey from Pain to Purpose, and the Postpartum Action Manual. Her most recent endeavor is the Postpartum Action Institute, where she provides workshops for learning about all things related to maternal mental health and helping people really be able to get back into their communities and work with families who need support. She continues to lecture and train internationally on the role of social support and the emotional health of the whole family. So we're really going to be talking about not just maternal mental health today, but including the whole family in the discussion of wellness. Welcome, Jane. I'm so happy to have you on with us today.
Thank you, Kat. It's a pleasure.
I am really honored to have you on and excited to share with the listeners the breadth and depth of work that you've done in maternal mental health and really starting maternal mental health as a thing. So maybe we can start there. And I want to know about the work that you're doing now, but maybe you can start with telling us how this all started.
It started really through my own personal experience, as is a common phenomena with people who become activists. Yeah. And the irony is that I had no idea what I was really starting. So there's a lot to be said for naivete and ignorance, but my own personal experience goes back more than 50 years ago when I gave birth before marriage, and my husband and I weren't ready, and that baby was placed for adoption, and it was a secret. And then when we went on and married and had two more children, and I found I was struggling a lot, not understanding why it was so difficult, things started pulling together. But the beauty of doing it, quote unquote, right, was at least we could find a community. And the community we found is the basis of all my work. And that was in 1970s. And my girlfriends and I started Postpartum Education for Parents here in Santa Barbara, California. And we started a warm line, switched on all staff by volunteer parents who've been trained. That was us. And we did that July 1, 1977. And that's 40 years ago.
Wow, so it's coming up.
Yeah. Yep, we're celebrating big time. And then 10 years later, by virtue of some phone calls that came my way through the publicity that PEP generated, I got absolutely connected and probably pulled in or fell into the world of psychiatry. I mean, it was a complete accident.
Wow. It's amazing how that all came together, that people found you, and it must have been a really needed resource.
Well, it's a wonderful story, and in terms of details, it's all in my little book that I've put out because I think the journey is important for people to understand that there are people who came before all of us, and this is something that's ancient and neglected, and we have to become more understanding of why, and it's all about the stigma. But it's not just about mental illness. It's about the whole journey and transitioning as a human being. We all tend to think it's all going to be wonderful and easy, and by virtue of the fact that we have problems in the world, obviously, nothing is easy, and parenthood is among that group. Right.
Absolutely. And the work that you started there in Santa Barbara with PEP, that's still going.
Oh, yes. It's a remarkable organization, and it's the model that, if you were going to ask me what has changed and not changed, the fact that PEP remains the model that we started, because we really addressed our own needs and wondering why there wasn't anybody for us after we given birth. And that's, we were the first organization to use the word postpartum in America. Now, the Canadians had already done that, but their focus was on depression and anxiety around the same time that PEP was starting around adjustment to parenthood. And then you can see where this goes. We need to be united, and that's what has happened. But I feel that the biggest gap still is in terms of prevention. And the prevention has to be around wellness. And the wellness model simply is not embedded into our communities as well as it can be, as it is in Santa Barbara, for example. But it's all about peer support, grassroots, community-based, self-help, all those words that mean a lot to me. And I'm a product of the 60s. So we believe in a whole lot of simple stuff. And that's what PEP still stands for. The common sense, being there, non-judgmental, allowing people to go through their own journey, but be there for us to do, assuming it's going to be all fine and well, which is not, but we have to be there for people.
Right. So that wellness model is different from the kind of illness model of there's something wrong with you and we need to fix you. That is kind of pervasive still.
Yeah, and that's the irony of it for me, is that I didn't start from the illness part. When we start from, it's challenging, it's overwhelming, it's difficult, it's frustrating, things that are simply emotions and circumstances. And as I said, I got sort of pulled into this world of medicine and psychiatry, like, what are you talking about? When they the journalist called me in the early 80s saying, well, what kind of calls do you get on the PEP warm line? How many do you get on postpartum depression? And I really paused and thought, we have no idea. Nobody's talking about this. And
interesting.
The neglected aspect of integrating emotions into wellness, into midwifery and obstetrics. And it just didn't happen because in the Western model, we separate it all out.
Right. Head and body are separate, essentially. And it's still, it's still a problem. Exactly.
It's ongoing. And it's getting better because, ironically, of understanding trauma. I think, with the outcome of all of our wars, understanding there really is something that happens to the brain and it's a trauma, and then backing it up and say, well, what other kind of times are traumatic? And birth is a big one, and people just don't see it that way.
Right, because of all of these ideas, like you were mentioning before, about what it's supposed to be like, and all these romantic ideas we have about motherhood and birth.
Yeah, and I want to throw the men in there. We wouldn't be having this conversation without the sperm. And I think that's the other thing that upsets me the most right now, is the lack of conversation around the fact this is not a woman's issue. And I'm a feminist. I come from the times when we were really, really championing there are no differences between men and women, and the men have to be in the labor. What do you mean they got me pregnant? Why isn't he there for the delivery? And why isn't he changing diapers? Well, so we have that phenomenon too, and now we understand as many men have depression as women. And yet we're just ignoring that. And then we also ignore the fact that this impacts on relationships. normal stuff impacts our relationship.
No kidding, right?
And, and so then throw in the baby, and it's just so difficult. And the big one is sleep deprivation.
Yeah, I mean, these are huge factors that are difficult, and it's on some level. It seems like people say, "Oh yeah, moms are tired," and just it's this fact, but it's a really dismissed fact that, well, that actually affects you if you don't sleep.
It's a form of torture, and
it
they
is.
use it during war, and they get things out of people.
Yeah.
And we dismiss this.
Right. So if I can backpedal for just a second, after the foundation of PEP, then you went on to found Postpartum Support International.
Right, and that's the result of having received this phone call that set me in direction of psychiatry. I started attending scientific meetings and learning from the world's experts in the 80s what this is, psychiatric problems related to childbearing. It's like, what are you talking about? And I became the willing student of my mentor, James Hamilton, who is absolutely the guru of the times. He is a remarkable man who taught me everything I know, and then connected me into the Marce Society. And Marce Society is where I've been most active in terms of sitting and listening to the experts, trying to understand what it is that we know is going on, and it's been since Hippocrates, so this is nothing new. And it's been difficult to get the idea of science and medicine to be integrated into normality. And actually, Dr. Hamilton said, Jane, what you're doing with PEP is what we need to look at. We need to know what's normal. We don't even know what's normal. That's something that resonates with me. And he believed in social support. He's the one who named Postpartum Support International.
Wow.
And he really must be revered, in my opinion, for bringing this to the forefront, and that he was so ahead of his time. His peers just laughed at him. Oh no,
that's terrible.
His first book that he sent me a copy was written in 1962, called Postpartum Psychiatric Problems.
Wow.
And that's the basis of everything for me. And then he was central to bringing together the experts who are another generation younger, so my peers from the scientific world around the world, scientists around the world, the researchers, and I adore these people, the peers who have always respected the role that I represent. The people, the consumer, the lived experience, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And that's very, very important. But we all fight the fact that this is a multidiscipline phenomena, and we put everything in silos.
Yeah.
And we don't talk to each other.
Right. So like from the medical aspects, OBs and pediatricians and psychiatrists and therapists, no one's coming together to talk about it as a whole.
Well, they do, but it's the Marce Society. And then when I would attend my Marce meetings, they were mostly in England, I'd come back and say, now, wait a minute, why, first of all, can't that research be spoken in normal English so normal people can understand that? And then again, PEP and the models that I'd learned about in Canada, and by that time I'd met people who'd done work similar to peer support led in England and in South Africa, and then things started up in Australia around this time. So I got everybody together, and we founded Postpartum Support International, and they complement each other.
Yeah.
So the idea that what I wanted to do was support the supporters, so that people who are out there doing work in this field know that they can come together, listen to the latest research, meet each other. And you find the same thing in the Marce meetings. You feel like family because you're working on something that's so important and so big and so complicated, but everybody goes home to their own little silo, and then we don't make progress. But we have made progress. So enter government, because the politics of this is very powerful.
What have you seen over these years in terms of the change?
Yes, people are talking about it. The most important thing is to say it's not in the closet any longer. It's out there. It's integrated into people's understanding. You do need to ask people how they're feeling. But you need systems of action. And actually that's what Dr. Hamilton called PEP. When I gave my first little talk, he said, it's a system of action. And again, it's based on the wellness model. You don't wait for someone to be ill. You automatically assume everybody needs support.
Yeah, that's so simple and brilliant at the same time. I mean,
isn't it funny?
It's exactly. This is not rocket science to assume that everyone's going to need support.
I'll tell you what went off the tracks. Maybe the listeners don't want to hear it, but it's about the profit side of our world, and people who want to be paid to be there for people. That's important, and those people need to be in place, but we need to have the step before that is how do you get people referred to professionals? Right. And the conversation has to be done in a normal fashion, and that has to be done in the grassroots peer support model.
Right. So if, you could have a brilliant therapist or doctor or whoever who can help. But if there's no connection to this, like the grassroots, as you described it, the kind of real day-to-day mom, first of all, how are they going to find this expert? And secondly, how are they going to know that they're a good person to go to? And there's a lot involved in that.
It's so much involved. And so the countries that actually are making the most progress, and they'll say they're not doing a very good job, but they're the ones who have socialized medicine, nationalized health care systems in place. In America, it's our public health system because the government is in the United States has always actually worked for the people. People just don't realize that it is such. And the problem is, again, the splitting off of physical from mental health. And but that's across the life cycle. It's time to shift, and we are shifting slowly, but it's about stigma again. And, hey, I'm having a baby. What do you mean I might have a mental illness? I mean, what do you mean I might have a difficulty? Nevertheless, the fact that I want to divorce my husband and I never want to have sex again, and I'm miserable, or that he is completely clueless. He doesn't know what happened to his wife and the mother of his children or the partners. I mean, there are a lot of partners. It's also, we need to remember there are a lot of same-sex couples, too, who enter this, and there are those who adopt, and everybody has a piece of this. And the other thing I want to emphasize is this is really a conversation that has to begin pre-conception. Yeah. Because what we do know from the science, and nothing has changed, is that we all know this is familial. We runs in families. We know that the greatest, most fascinating new field is epigenetics, where we understand it may not impact this generation, but it impacts the next generation and the next generation. Right. So, these conversations need to begin. Shall we become parents? Maybe not.
Right. Right. For some people, maybe not. And for some people, in terms of what you're describing, that getting the information out to people, before they start trying to have children, that's hard to do.
It really is. I love the population of our teens, actually. But it's a conversation around sexuality. Yeah. It's a conversation around mental wellness and health. Yeah. It's a conversation about genealogy, which I'm a big proponent of. We need to know where we come from. It's called heritage. It's ancestral. We have to know. We are now marrying people who are partnering with people who are very not like us. In some cultures where there's more uniformity in terms of I know the person's neighbors, families, we've all been together all these years. I'm a part of a clan or a religious group or whatever you may say. There's something to be said for the fact that there might be more ease with discussing this or understanding that this is an important topic or not. But when we travel or we have war or famine or any of these things that disrupt something that is natural, is giving birth to the next generation. But there's a lot of problems in the world, and it all comes down to what are we doing during pregnancy to the fetus that's growing inside the woman.
So
there's violence around her.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's such, it's a hard concept, I think, to grasp, is that this idea that if we're really taking care of the family, of the woman, the baby in utero and the pregnancy and the family now, and before there's trouble, on some level, before things happen, is that's protective of future generations. That's protective of that child's adulthood.
Absolutely. And we know it. And the sad part is, how much have we looked into, how much money we put into preventing child abuse or domestic violence or any of these things that are so sad. Why is there such a high prison population? Why do we have things that are, why is there such poverty in pockets around the world? And a lot of it is just like staring us in the face. One of it is nutrition.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. People are starving. People are malnourished, and their brains don't function well, and their pregnancies are completely disaster.
Right.
I wonder I say it's a wonder that we're all still here, really.
Right. Yeah. Thinking about it on that global perspective, if we can just take care of pregnant women and babies and families better, then we're all better off.
The world is a better place. Absolutely. If you want to look at, that happiness quotient thing they do, and they go, where are the happiest countries, and why are they happy? Well, the truth is they usually have a government that really takes care of everybody from, to cradle to grave.
Oh, that's deep. That's deep.
Sorry, I got nothing there.
Oh no, I know. I mean, that's what I love about talking with you, and your perspective is that you've seen this particular field around maternal mental health grow and develop, and you've helped it to do that, and it's taken multiple different avenues now. But there are ways that basically everything that we live in affects a mom.
Yeah.
It affects the family, affects the baby. And it's not just this, we put them, this myopic we put them in this box and, oh, that lady's pregnant and, she's not doing enough, or whatever blame we're now putting on the mom and the dad.
Well, we blame everybody for everything. Let's face it. You're not good enough anything. I mean, and don't just include the women. I mean, this is hard on the men.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the most important messages that I got from starting PEP, and notice postpartum education for parents, we were adamant that it would be not a woman's issue.
Yeah.
And we still are doing the same thing. So I would like the language to be parental mental health.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. That's true, that the focus is so much on the mom and the baby, and really forgetting the whole system. Right. Or the partner too is often left out, and doesn't have to be a husband.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, and then the other generations, I love to make a little joke about the fact that true definition of postpartum, the word is an adjective for the first year of life for the newborn. But I'd like to point out that now that I'm a grandmother, you're really postpartum forever, because every time you see this newborn or the prospect of becoming another generation, it impacts you emotionally. And grandparents have a really difficult time. They probably don't want to admit it, but we go through another time where you're not sure of yourself. You don't know your role.
Wow.
You want to say a lot, but you're probably going to say the wrong thing. And this is tough. This is tough. So we must dismiss it.
So in terms of, it sounds like the direction that you'd like, advocacy and training to go into this parental mental health and inclusive of all generations that are affected by bringing a new life into the world.
Yeah, and all cultures. And I always like to remind people about their spiritual backgrounds as well. Mm-hmm. One of our most obvious communities is that around the spiritual, whether you belong to a traditional institution called a church or a synagogue or a mosque or whatever, or not, there's that component as well that sometimes gets left out. And they are uncomfortable. The institutions are very uncomfortable around mental health. But they are a great resource, and it's something that's in our community, and then that's another area for training. But I like to switch the word training into conversations. I think that it's about having conversations and understanding that plenty's been written, plenty of research is out there. We know what works, we know what doesn't, we know what we can do. But the question is, have we evaluated our own community? Can we honestly say, I know that the journey from conception to pregnancy to postpartum to on and on through life, is that family in a nice place? Is it going to be cocooned in the progression of this family development? And in Santa Barbara, because we have put together something that carried on after childbirth education, it does. But you have to have everybody look at their community and say, is there a place where I can go for free and I'll meet other people like me who are having children at the same time that I can bond with? And that's the friendship component, again, that's so simple and yet so complex. It's like, how am I going to find somebody who's going through this? So we actually had to invent it, and that's what PEP is based on our own needs. Our families should be doing all this. The families are disrupted, and my girlfriend and I who started it, we didn't have any family here. So we invented PEP.
That's crucial. And so that's what you were describing before, that things have become monetized, or people are looking for only to be compensated for their supporting others. And sounds like part of what you're calling for is fine, have those services, but also have something that's free to the community and available to everyone.
You have to have both. And that's the model that works, where you have everything, and you have a range of professionals who understand this transition from both sides of the spectrum, from the very mild to I'm just adjusting, having a terrible time, to the extreme, where we have to have hospitals that are suitable for families to come together and bring their babies, and the mother has to be hospitalized.
Right.
We have what I learned early on is that from Dr. Hamilton is the continuum of reaction to childbearing. And the idea that this is from a mild side of life events, and then we get through it, to the extreme ones where we could suffer irreparable harm. And if we start thinking about it like that, rather than categorizing everything into certain kind of diagnosis, I think we'd be nicer to ourselves and more apt to destigmatize the conversation. Because we do talk about baby blues, and we need to, and we do know that the same time that there's an onset of I've had the baby and now I'm crying, is the same time when a woman could have a psychotic episode. So again, we have to be there for all of this. And then we have late onsets. We have people who are just doing fine, thank you very much. And then we discover that they had a secret and they had never told anybody, and now they're reliving a trauma. And they don't know where to turn. Right.
So, I mean, having these conversations and getting it out to the public, making like the things that we're describing and talking about available to everybody, to be part of the discussion, to have the information, to have the awareness, is for free. You shouldn't have to pay to be informed about your health.
Right. And
is
that people
crucial.
do still want to be private about things. We are all absolutely individuals. And when we shut the door, we, have our families unto ourselves. And when we're ready, we need to be able to open it and know that if somebody's knocking on the door saying, "Hi, I'm here for you," you can be ready for that. Because not everybody's ready to have these conversations.
That's true. That's true. But, also just as you were saying, to be putting it out there, to be talking about it, having even casual conversations about it. You never know who's listening, just in terms of, maternal mental health awareness campaigns right now, just even simple things, sharing an article with a friend or putting, social media, people are using it. They may scroll by, they may never interact with that. Or like it or whatever, but they'll see it and maybe they'll be able to think about themselves and their situation a little differently.
Well, there's that aha moment that suddenly comes because I'm a good example of how I suppressed my personal experience for so long, and how it acted because I was keeping a secret for so long. And so your listeners know, I did resolve that, finally found peace. But it took me 25 years. Yeah. So that's a quarter of my life, assuming I'm going to live to 100, which I intend to do. So again, not everybody's ready. Now, my husband was ready before I was, but he was afraid to bring it up. My mother was devastated by the secret and never would have brought it up. But my father-in-law was the one who wanted to know, is Jane ready to talk about it? And even though I was surrounded by girlfriends who started PEP, and we do all this kind of peer support naturally and have lots of friendship around that, I was palling around with the best psychiatrist in the world, and I didn't say anything. And I didn't know that what I had experienced, it was a trauma. It was an unresolved trauma to place my baby for adoption and never talk about her. Now I can say that she's very much a part of our lives, and she's married and has 2 children, and that's why I have 8 grandchildren. All of this stuff, there are so many secrets out there, and people are not willing to bring them forth, and we have to. Right.
And the work that you're doing now is really to help any kind of provider learn about these things, and be able to go back out into their communities and do this kind of work. Can you share a little bit about what you're doing now these days?
Yes. So I've written several books, and the book that prompted me to start Postpartum Action Institute with my dear friend and colleague, Shoshanna Bennett, is based on the book that I wrote called Postpartum Action Manual. And I wrote this manual after I'd written I'm Listening, which is the basis of my work as a peer support person. That it's very basic. We realized that people are having wonderful trainings. They go to fantastic conferences. And I love doing that. But we all go home, and then we put that interesting stuff back on the shelf, or our life gets busy and we move on. What we need more of is conversations around, this is where I am, this is where I have been, in a small, intimate setting where you really can have a conversation. So our institute is designed around that, bringing people together in small settings so they can share their own past and their present and their visions for the future. And it's not professional providers. We believe that anybody who's interested in this topic, which is to destigmatize parenthood, should be having these conversations and then becoming advocates in their own communities to start something like PEP. PEP is something that's not near and dear to your community yet. It should be. But we struggle with several things. One is that we're not comfortable around the topic of depression. So we need to demystify that, and it's about perceptions of that, so we have a conversation around that. And I love doing all-day trainings, where I call them workshops, where we get everybody comfortable talking open and honestly. And my most recent one was in West Virginia. And this is to a population of extreme poverty, well embedded services that are trying so hard to improve the families' lives in that particular state. And they have tremendous challenges. But the first thing we did was talk about how comfortable are you talking about depression.
Yeah.
And we're talking about all professionals. You need to be able to say, yes, I know what this feels like. I too have had depression.
Right.
Or I struggled as a parent. My wife, just didn't want to look at me again after I got her pregnant, whatever it may be. It doesn't matter what hat you put on during the day, in your heart, who are you and where have you been? And that's the pulling together of all these people to become real advocates for families.
It's awesome. Okay, so you need to be everywhere with this. You and Shoshanna Bennett can just travel and spread this beautifulness everywhere.
Yeah, but it's actually something that people can start having conversations in their own town. And my book, the Postpartum Action Manual, is actually the course that we take people through. So the idea is that, you can follow this course. And the beauty of this course that developed is from an organization called CARE. Are you familiar with the anti-poverty? The most, and it's the biggest one around the world. It's been around since post-war, Second World War in the 40s. And the concept of CARE is to go in and work within the communities. And they were doing work in nutrition in Bangladesh, and they were seeing postpartum depression. And they, I came along, and they used my book, I'm Listening, and they ended up training their home visitors, people who are going into the homes in a very, very different kind of culture than what we have.
Right.
And they adapted it, and then I took that and then rewrote it for getting it out to everybody. And then,
amazing.
It's pretty common sense. It's pretty common sense, and that's the thing, that this shouldn't be shying away that this is complicated or too beyond me, that I need another degree in order to do this. I don't believe that.
Right. Because you're bringing it back to kind of fundamentals. This is not a complicated idea to be there for people where they are and figure out with them what they need to feel better or to cope.
You nailed it. That's beautiful. That you just said.
Okay, great. I mean, that is really something that we all can do. It takes a little bit of intention and thinking through, and how do we do that? But it's accessible to everyone. And that's actually
what throws people off. It's like, well, I think there should be a support group. I'm going to start one. And wait a minute. It's not that simple. So I wrote a book on that too.
Yeah.
And it's a workbook. It takes people through the steps to doing something for your community. You can't just have good intent.
Right.
So you need to find the people with whom you can work. And again, that book is to try to get people to understand it is simple, but it is a process, and you have to be dedicated to it. Yeah. So PSI is in the process of ongoing, further developing social support networks in your community. That's my vision. It's always been my vision. There should be a postpartum parent support community in every village, city, town, whatever you want to call it, in the world. Yeah. And nobody should have to be searching outside of their own.
They are. They still are. It's rough. That is sad.
But why is it so rough? You have to ask.
Right. Well, I know that there are a lot of people who listen to this podcast who have either been through something themselves or are looking for ways to do things in their community. And the things that you're describing are perfect. They can grab your book. They can figure out ways to implement these things in a thoughtful way into their communities.
Absolutely, and I'm available to consult with anybody, anywhere, anytime. And I have a lovely woman right now in Norway who has gone through something that she's considered less than wonderful, which is what I call it. a Norwegian who ended up marrying an Australian. She gives birth in Australia. She suffers terribly, but Australia gave her great support. Then she's back in Norway, and guess what she wants to do? Improve things in Norway. And boy, she's being successful. She's already has the ear of the government.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's wonderful. And it's so much fun. I mean, I get an email every now and then from her, and what next question she has for me. And, we connect her to the Marce Society and all these other people that are already out there.
That's what I love about this community that I dove into after my experience with postpartum depression, anxiety, OCD, all that, is like, I think because it was founded by people like you and people who really care, and, Shoshanna's in there, and Wendy Davis, and the founders and people who continue this, is this giving. There's a selflessness about it that's so welcoming and supportive, and whatever you need, I'm here for you. Let's do this together. I really love that. And I think that
fantastic.
What's that?
It's fantastic. And it's at all levels, the finest researchers and psychiatrists down to the consumer in her neighborhood. Everybody is family around this topic. Yeah. And I want to mention the professionals who work with infant mental health. Yeah. Finally, we're on the same table, having conferences at the same time, because you can't have a mentally well infant without mentally well parents, can you? Right. No. And they were left out. They were not even in the conversations for so many decades. Oh. Well, I mean, things are moving at a faster pace now in terms of, lots and lots more people being on board. I think social media has a role to play in that, and getting messages sent across the oceans and waves and all of that stuff. And I'm so grateful to get your perspective on all of this, and that love that you're still so passionate about all of this, and still in the work and still doing it every day. It's just inspiring. Oh, well, it's a pleasure. And, I want to get it done while I'm still alive, as I like to tell people. That's not going to happen. So we're mentoring lots and lots of younger people who are awesome and are continuing on. And I want to remind people that there is a path. There was somebody before me, and I want to make sure that people know of Dr. Hamilton and the other awesome individuals who went out of their way to make this a better world. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for making this a better world for all of us, and for doing the work that you do that ultimately helped me too. Oh, I appreciate you. Well, I appreciate you too. And this has been a great pleasure. Thank you so much for being on with us. I'm so glad you guys were able to listen in to this conversation with Jane. She is just a wealth of knowledge and wisdom, and she's done so much for this field, and really for all of us who've dealt with any type of mental health issue related to pregnancy or birth or postpartum. So, her work is foundational in a lot of the support that we get out on our communities now. So there were some really cool things coming up. The Postpartum Education for Parents, PEP, in Santa Barbara is having its 40-year anniversary in June. And Jane would be happy to see anybody there who wants to come and celebrate with them. Also, Postpartum Support International is having its 30-year anniversary this year. You can check out. That's another beautiful milestone in terms of the work that Jane has done and the support that we are getting. You can also find Jane at janehonikman.com, and you can find out more about the workshops and training that she provides through Postpartum Action Institute. I'll have all of this information for you guys in the show notes for you to check out and find out more about the work that Jane is doing, and how you can find some of her books if you're looking to get support for yourself or start some support in your own community. Thank you for joining us today. If you or someone you know is having a hard time, help is available. Please look for resources for help at momandmind.com. Also, please subscribe and share this podcast. Together, we can support moms and families so that no one has to deal with this alone.
Thank you for being a part of the Mom and Mind community.